The night that changed everything began like any other. I had been struggling with chronic seizures for years, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened when my head hit the kitchen floor that cold February evening. I remember checking the clock before heading to the kitchen for my evening medication, 11:37 p.m. My husband Joseph was working the night shift at the hospital, and our house felt unusually quiet. The silence was broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. As I reached for the medicine cabinet, I felt the familiar aura that preceded my seizures. The metallic taste in my mouth, the strange tingling sensation that started at my fingertips and quickly spread up my arms, but this time was different. This time, the seizure hit with such force that I had no time to call for help or even lower myself safely to the floor. My body went rigid before violently convulsing. I felt myself falling, and then came the sickening crack as my head struck the corner of the kitchen island. Pain exploded through my skull, sharp, blinding, absolute, and then, mercifully, darkness. What happened next defies all logical explanation. I was suddenly floating near the ceiling of my kitchen, looking down at my own body sprawled on the tile floor. A growing pool of blood surrounded my head, reflecting the overhead light in a way that seemed almost beautiful if it hadn't been so terrifying. This can't be happening, I thought, but the strange detachment I felt told me otherwise. I wasn't afraid, just confused. I looked at my hands. They were translucent, yet somehow more real than they had ever been. I could see the kitchen through them, yet they felt solid to me. I watched as my chest stopped rising and falling. My face, already pale in life, took on an ashen quality that I recognized as the absence of life. I knew with absolute certainty that my physical body had died, yet I remained conscious, aware, and somehow more alive than I had ever felt. From somewhere in the distance, I heard sirens. My neighbor must have heard the crash and called for help. I watched as paramedics broke through the front door and rushed to my body. They worked frantically, pressing paddles to my chest, forcing air into my lungs, desperately trying to bring me back. "She's been down too long," one of them said, his voice tight with tension. "It's been at least 10 minutes since the neighbor called." "Keep going," another responded firmly. "We don't give up." I wanted to tell them I was fine, that I was right there watching them, but no sound came from my spiritual lips. I felt a strange pull upward, drawing me away from the scene below. I resisted at first, worried about leaving my body behind, but the pull grew stronger, more insistent. Then I noticed something extraordinary. A brilliant beam of light had appeared near the ceiling. Not quite physical, but more real than anything in the room. It wasn't exactly a tunnel, as I'd heard described in other accounts, but rather a pathway of pure, golden light that seemed to beckon me. I hesitated only briefly before surrendering to its call. As I moved toward the light, I became aware of a profound sense of peace washing over me. All fear, all pain, all worries about what I was leaving behind melted away. I felt weightless, boundless, free. The moment I entered the light, I was no longer in my kitchen. The physical world fell away completely, and I found myself traveling at incredible speed through what I can only describe as layers of reality. Colors I had never seen before, colors that don't exist in our physical world, streamed past me. The sensation was exhilarating, like flying but without the limitations of a physical body. As I traveled through this magnificent corridor of light, I became aware of a sound, music unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't coming from any particular direction, but seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. The harmonies were impossibly complex yet perfectly balanced, creating melodies that spoke directly to my soul. The journey seemed both instantaneous and eternal. Time, as I understood it, had lost all meaning. I could have been traveling for seconds or centuries. It made no difference here. Gradually, the brilliant pathway opened into a vast, open space. I found myself floating above the most breathtaking landscape I had ever seen. Below me stretched endless rolling hills, covered in grass so vibrantly green it almost seemed to glow from within. Each blade moved gently, though I felt no wind, as if each one were alive and breathing. I descended slowly until my feet, or what felt like feet in this new form, touched the grass. The sensation was extraordinary. I could feel each blade's gentle caress, not just against my skin, but somehow through my entire being. The grass itself seemed to acknowledge my presence, bending slightly toward me as if in welcome. In the distance, I saw trees bearing fruit of magnificent colors and flowers that dwarfed any earthly bloom. The colors were so vibrant, so pure, that they seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The air, if it was air, felt thick with love, with a presence that surrounded and permeated everything. I took a step forward, marveling at how movement worked in this place. I didn't walk so much as glide, my intention to move forward translating instantly into motion. As I moved through this extraordinary landscape, I noticed something even more remarkable. I could see everything with perfect clarity, not just in front of me, but in all directions simultaneously. I could focus on a single blade of grass and see its intricate structure in microscopic detail, then effortlessly expand my awareness to take in the entire panorama. The sky above wasn't blue but seemed to shimmer with an opalescent quality, shifting through countless hues as I watched. There was light everywhere, but no sun that I could see. The light seemed to come from everything: the grass, the trees, the flowers. Even the air itself glowed with a soft luminescence. As I moved forward, I became aware of a structure in the distance, massive walls of pure white that seemed to be made of living stone. They rose impossibly high, gleaming with an inner radiance that made them appear both solid and ethereal at once. And set within those walls were gates, magnificent gates that shimmered with gold and precious stones. I knew without being told that I was seeing the gates of heaven. As I moved toward those magnificent gates, the beauty around me intensified. The landscape became even more vibrant, the music more complex and beautiful. I noticed figures moving around me, beings of light that I instinctively knew were angels. They didn't have the human-like appearance with wings that art has depicted throughout the centuries. Instead, they were magnificent beings of pure light, their forms shifting and flowing like living flame, yet perfectly defined. Some of these beings seemed to take notice of me, radiating what I can only describe as welcome and joy. Others were focused on tasks I couldn't comprehend, moving with purpose through the landscape or attending to aspects of this realm that were beyond my understanding. As I drew closer to the gates, I saw they were even more magnificent than they had appeared from a distance. What I had thought was gold was actually a material unknown to Earth, something that glowed with its own inner fire, shifting and moving as if alive. The gates weren't static structures, but seemed to pulse with energy and purpose. Before the gates stood a being of tremendous presence, an angel far more majestic than those I had seen in the meadows. This being radiated authority and power, yet also immense compassion. Though the angel had no physical form as we understand it, I perceived him as masculine, tall and imposing, with eyes that contained galaxies of wisdom. Behind him, I could see a line of souls waiting to enter. Some appeared confident and joyful, others seemed uncertain. A few looked downright fearful. I understood instinctively that this was a place of judgment, though not in the harsh, condemning sense that humans often imagine. Rather, it was a place of truth, absolute, unvarnished truth about who each soul truly was. The angel held what appeared to be a large book, though it wasn't made of paper and binding. It was a living record, the pages shifting and reforming as he consulted them. With each soul that approached, he would look into this book, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply nodding and gesturing them through. Some souls were directed to other gates that I could now see spaced around the massive walls. I understood somehow that different souls needed different kinds of healing and preparation before they could enter the full presence of God. As I approached, joining the line of waiting souls, I felt a strange combination of peace and anticipation. There was no fear. Fear seemed impossible in this place of perfect love. But there was a solemn recognition of the importance of what was happening. While waiting, I studied the gates more carefully. They appeared to be made of a single pearl, just as described in Scripture, yet they weren't opaque like earthly pearls. They seemed translucent, allowing glimpses of the glory that lay beyond. A city of indescribable beauty. Buildings of crystal and gold, gardens more magnificent than anything I had seen in the outer realms. The line moved forward steadily, each soul's encounter with the angel lasting only moments. Though again, time had little meaning here. Some souls were embraced by the angel before passing through. Others received a gentle touch on the shoulder or a word spoken too quietly for me to hear. As my turn approached, I felt myself being examined, not just by the angel at the gate, but by a presence that seemed to permeate everything around me. It wasn't invasive or judgmental, but rather like standing in a light so pure that every aspect of my being was illuminated. I saw myself as I truly was, my acts of kindness and my failures, my moments of courage and my times of weakness. Nothing was hidden, nothing was exaggerated. It was simply truth. When I finally stood before the angel, I was surprised to see his expression change from serene authority to confusion. He looked at me, then down at his book, then back at me again. His light dimmed slightly, as if in concentration. "Rosalie Waters," he said, his voice resonating not in my ears, but within my very being. "Your name is here, but not yet." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. "It is not your appointed time," he explained, his voice gentle but firm. "Your book is not yet complete." The angel must have seen my disappointment, for his light brightened with what I felt was compassion. "Before you return," he said, "you may be granted a glimpse of what awaits you when your time truly comes." With a gesture that seemed to bend space itself, the angel created an opening, not through the gates, but somehow beside them. "This way," he said, "but remember, you are only a visitor here." I stepped through the opening and found myself in the heavenly city. The splendor that had been partially visible through the gates now surrounded me completely. Streets that appeared to be made of pure gold stretched before me, yet they weren't solid as earthly gold would be. They seemed almost fluid, shimmering with light that came from within rather than being reflected. Buildings of astonishing beauty rose on either side, their architecture defying earthly laws of physics. Some appeared to be made of single gemstones, entire structures of sapphire, emerald, or ruby. But like everything else in this realm, they were alive in some inexplicable way, pulsing with energy and purpose. Between these magnificent structures were gardens of unimaginable beauty, trees bearing fruit I had never seen before, lined paths of pearl and crystal. Flowers in colors impossible on earth bloomed everywhere, their fragrances blending into a perfume that refreshed and invigorated my spirit. Throughout the city moved beings of light, some I recognized as angels, others as human souls who had been welcomed into this eternal home. All were engaged in purposeful activity, though what that purpose was, I couldn't always discern. There was joy in their movements, a sense of fulfillment and belonging that radiated from them. Music flowed throughout the city, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't just heard, it was felt, experienced on every level of being. The harmonies were impossibly complex, yet perfectly balanced, creating a symphony that seemed to be the very language of creation itself. As I moved through this magnificent place, I became aware of a central area where the light was even more intense, the music more profound. I was drawn to it irresistibly, understanding somehow that this was the heart of heaven, the throne room of God Himself. The approach to this sacred center was lined with beings unlike any I had seen before. They were clearly angels, but of an order so profound that they made the gatekeepers seem almost ordinary by comparison. These beings had multiple sets of wings, some covering their faces, others their feet, while still others were extended in flight, though they remained in place. Their forms shifted constantly between appearances that my human mind could barely comprehend. Aspects of eagles, oxen, lions, and humans, blending in ways that should have been terrifying, but were instead awe-inspiring. Seraphim, I somehow knew. The burning ones who stand in the very presence of God. These magnificent beings were crying out to one another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." The sound was beyond description, like thunder, like music, like a million voices in perfect harmony. With each proclamation, the very foundations of the heavenly city seemed to tremble. Beyond these beings, I could see what appeared to be a throne, though it wasn't a physical seat as we would understand it. It was more like a nexus of pure light, so blindingly brilliant that even in my spiritual form, I could barely look at it. The light wasn't just visual, it was love in its purest, most concentrated form, radiating outward in waves that permeated everything. And upon this throne, or perhaps more accurately as one with this throne, was a presence so magnificent, so utterly beyond description that words fail completely. I knew I was in the presence of God himself, the Creator, the I Am. Yet I wasn't afraid. The overwhelming sense was one of coming home, of being in the very place I was designed to be, in the presence of the one who had created me. To the right of this central throne was another presence, one that took on a more recognizable form. Though still radiating light and glory beyond anything earthly, this being appeared in a form I could comprehend. I knew without being told that I was looking at Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Unlike the Father's overwhelming brightness, Jesus appeared in a form that bridged the divine and the human. His face shone with love and wisdom beyond description, yet it was recognizably a face, one marked by both majesty and profound compassion. His hands, extended in welcome, bore the marks of crucifixion, now transformed into badges of glory rather than wounds of suffering. His eyes met mine, and in that moment, I experienced what I can only describe as perfect understanding. In his gaze, I saw myself as I truly was, not just my flaws and failures, but the person he had created me to be. I saw my entire life from his perspective. Every moment of joy and sorrow, every choice, every relationship, but viewed through a lens of such perfect love that even my darkest moments were bathed in compassion. I wanted to fall at his feet, to worship, to remain in his presence forever. But even as I had this thought, I felt a gentle restraint, a reminder that this was only a glimpse, not my final homecoming. "Not yet, Rosalie." His voice resonated within me, though his lips didn't move. "There is still work for you to do, still love for you to give and receive, still growth for you to experience." I wanted to protest, to beg to stay, but I knew with absolute certainty that his wisdom was perfect. If he said it wasn't my time, then it wasn't my time. "Remember what you have seen," he continued. "Share the truth of it, not to bring attention to yourself, but to remind others of what awaits those who love me. Many have forgotten that this is their true home, that they were created for more than the brief span of earthly existence." Even as he spoke these words, I felt myself beginning to withdraw, the throne room growing more distant, the light dimming, not because it was fading, but because I was being drawn away from it. As I was drawn away from the throne room, I found myself beside a magnificent river, water so clear it seemed almost invisible, except for the way it caught and refracted the omnipresent light. This was the river of life described in Scripture, flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb. The water moved with purpose and joy, almost dancing as it flowed. Like everything else in this realm, it was alive in a way that defied earthly understanding. As I knelt beside it, drawn by its beauty and purity, The water actually responded to my presence, a small wave rising up as if in greeting. I reached out tentatively to touch it. The moment my fingers made contact, knowledge flowed into me, not as information to be processed intellectually, but as direct understanding that became part of my very being. I saw how all creation was connected, how each soul was uniquely precious to God, how the apparent randomness of life on Earth was actually part of a pattern too vast and complex for human minds to comprehend. This living water showed me glimpses of God's perspective, how He sees each human life as a unique and precious story within the greater narrative of creation. I understood, if only for a moment, how even suffering could be woven into a tapestry of ultimate good, though the pattern might not be visible from our limited earthly perspective. As I withdrew my hand, a voice beside me said, "The water of life, freely given to all who thirst for righteousness." I turned to see another angelic being, different from the seraphim or the gatekeeper. This one appeared more approachable, more human-like, though still radiant with heavenly light. "It's time for you to return," the angel said gently. "Must I go back?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Your book is not yet complete," the angel repeated what the gatekeeper had told me. "There are pages yet to be written, lives you will touch, love you will share." "Will I remember this?" I asked, sudden fear gripping me at the thought of forgetting such glory. "Not all," the angel replied. "Your physical brain could not contain the fullness of what you've experienced here, but enough to bear witness, enough to live differently because of what you've seen." The angel reached out and touched my forehead. "Now you must return." The return journey wasn't like the approach. There was no gradual transition through realms of increasing beauty. Instead, it was sudden and jarring, like being plunged into cold water after basking in perfect warmth. One moment I was standing beside the river of life, the next I was rushing downward through darkness, the heavenly music fading into the distance. I felt heavy, confined, as if being compressed into a space too small to contain me. Then came pain, searing physical pain that had been entirely absent in the spiritual realm. My head throbbed with an intensity that would have been unbearable if not for the lingering memory of where I had just been. I heard voices, human voices, urgent and clinical. "We've got a rhythm. BP's coming up. Pupils responsive. Good sign. Let's get her stabilized for transport." I tried to speak, to tell them where I'd been, what I'd seen, but my physical lips wouldn't respond. My body felt like a machine that I had forgotten how to operate, heavy, clumsy, painfully limited after the freedom of spiritual existence. The paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher, the movement sending fresh waves of pain through my broken body. As they wheeled me out to the waiting ambulance, I caught a glimpse of the night sky through the open door. The stars seemed dim and distant compared to the radiance I had just left behind, yet they still spoke of the Creator's handiwork. In the ambulance, machines beeped, monitoring the fragile signs of life that had returned to my physical form. The paramedic beside me kept checking my vital signs, speaking encouragement though I couldn't respond. "Hang in there, you're doing great. We're getting you to the hospital." At the hospital, everything moved with controlled urgency. Doctors examined me, ordered scans, spoke in technical terms about brain swelling and skull fractures. I drifted in and out of consciousness, each return to awareness, bringing fresh waves of pain, but also increasing ability to process what was happening around me. I heard a doctor tell someone, my husband, I realized, that I had been clinically dead for nearly 20 minutes before the paramedics had revived me. "It's remarkable she's showing brain activity at all," the doctor said. "We won't know the extent of the damage until the swelling goes down." I wanted to laugh, if only they knew where my brain activity had just been. But laughter was beyond my physical capabilities at that moment. Days passed in a blur of pain medication, medical procedures, and gradual healing. As my physical strength returned, the memory of my heavenly journey remained vivid, but began to take on a dreamlike quality. Not that I doubted its reality, I knew with unshakable certainty that what I had experienced was more real than the hospital room around me. But the limitations of physical existence made it increasingly difficult to hold on to the fullness of the experience. Over the weeks of recovery that followed, I shared my story with others, my doctors, my friends, my pastor. Some responded with skepticism, others with wonder, a few with their own questions about what happens after death. I answered as honestly as I could, always emphasizing not the experience itself, but what it had taught me about God's love and the reality of eternal life. That was 3 years ago. My physical recovery was termed miraculous by my doctors, far more complete than anyone had expected given the severity of my injuries. But the true miracle was what happened within me. Fear of death has vanished completely. How can I fear what I now know to be a doorway to indescribable joy? This doesn't mean I'm eager to leave this life. I understand now that every moment here has purpose, every interaction potential for eternal significance. But the anxieties that once plagued me have been replaced by a deep, abiding peace. I share my story not to draw attention to myself, but because I was told to remember and to tell others. Not everyone will believe me, and that's okay. My experience wasn't given to me as proof for skeptics, but as encouragement for seekers, those who already sense that there must be more to existence than what we can see and touch in this physical realm. To those who wonder what awaits beyond death, I can say with absolute certainty, love awaits. Not an abstract concept of love, but love himself, personal, powerful, perfect in wisdom and compassion. The God who created you knows you completely and loves you unconditionally. Heaven is real, more real than anything you've experienced in this shadow world, and it is a place prepared for those who love God and accept the redemption offered through Jesus Christ. This life is not all there is. It's merely the preface to an eternal story, a story in which every tear will be wiped away, every wrong will be made right, and joy beyond imagination will be our forever reality. I know this not because someone told me, not because I read it in a book, but because for 20 miraculous minutes, I experienced the beginning of that reality myself.